these verses that we have just heard are often taken somewhat out of context by our evangelical brethren, and being born again for them is somewhat separate from the element of water, which in the Lord's own words surrounds what he is affirming. For them, the element of water comes in as a testimony to what has already happened at the moment of conversion, which they would also call regeneration, the Latin for being born again. And therefore, the fundamental issue for them is this handing over of the will, over which the water has no effect except that of sealing and giving a public witness. Now, it's easy to say it's all wrong. That's not true. There is truth in the element of handing the will. In that we find them in the spiritual mode. There is true ecumenical encounter on that level of the will. That a soul who has made that act of surrendering the will is, from that moment on, heading home. And we, with all our sacramental system, if we're not doing that, can be hiding behind that barrage of apparent safety and perhaps not making it. The situation that one perhaps can observe in a Catholic Ireland, where massively people think that it's enough to do certain things, whereas in fact there's no obedience to the divine will or intimacy with the Sacred Heart. So it's not all wrong. In that element we have to respect our brethren and also be humble before the mystery of another soul. Having said that, we have, coming from the upper room, the fullness. And it's in that fullness that I want to abide for a few seconds today. Ellen handed me this to read, and I found it helpful. It may be your case as well. While praying here today, I saw this help us to remind us what we're talking about. Can you all see it? It's just an icon like any other, but it's actually quite oriental, which fits very well what I want to attack in this period in which the whole world is thinking about that country, the Ukraine. By the way, this year, the Holy Fire, the one lit by God himself, the Holy Sepulchre on Holy Saturday, it reached the Crimea for the first time, because now it's under Russia and it was able to get that far. Anyway, that's not the story. So, this is the context. The greater Christian family that goes back without a break. The country in question is a bridge country, and it is not without importance both for the past and also, it would seem, for the future. Are you sitting comfortably?
Yes.
Then I shall begin. The beginning of this series of events is 1987. It was an important year of grace and mercy for the whole world when now St. John Paul II, on Pentecost Sunday, officially consecrated it to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. She in turn promised through her visionaries to manifest her great power to mankind, and that her light would become more powerful as events began to unfold. Early in the morning on Sunday, April the 26th, 1987, a strange light appeared above the balcony of the disused Church of the Holy Trinity in Hurishif. This is actually, it would have been a Catholic church, but there was this pressure on the Catholic Church in the Ukraine under the Soviets to make them Orthodox or to peter out. Now, those who noticed, this is a small village in the Carpathian Russian mountains there of the west of this country, Ukraine. Those who noticed it didn't think it unusual and continued on their way. It was the Sunday after Easter, what by now is Divine Mercy Sunday, but in that part of the world it would be known as St. Thomas's Day. The day when Ukrainians traditionally honour their dead, that's interesting, and visit the graves in the cemetery. In Wales, which is a Protestant culture, it's Easter Day. All the graves throughout Wales are covered in flowers. At 8 o'clock, a young girl, Marina Kisin, left her home near the church to go to school. On passing the church, she noticed a light and, being curious, went closer. She was surprised to see a woman holding a baby. She rushed back home to tell her mother, who thought she was trying to avoid school, and told her to stop imagining things and to calm down. Marina insisted she come and see for herself. At the bottom of the garden, the light was clearly visible, flooding the area with a warm glow. Closer to the church, Marina's mother also saw the beautiful woman holding a baby, who smiled and bowed her head in greeting. The mother whispered, "Kneel down, child, it is the Blessed Virgin Mary." The apparition lasted only a few minutes and then disappeared. Marina commented later, she wore black. The Blessed Virgin wore black. It was 1 year to the day since the catastrophe at the nuclear power plant at Chernobyl, which means wormwood, as you know, which is seen, of course, in the Apocalypse, only 300 miles away. Marina's mother rushed off to tell her friends. The village was soon buzzing with excitement. By evening, people in Drohobych, a town about 12 miles away, had also heard the news. A week later, the following Sunday, an estimated 100,000 people had gathered in Ryshivka. They had come from all over the Soviet Union to pray and thank God for the appearance of His Holy Mother. Believers and non-believers, Orthodox, Catholics, Jews and Muslims, Ukrainians, Georgians, Russians, White Russians, and people from as far away as Lithuania and Latvia in the Baltic states. They had come by whatever means possible. News of the apparition was already being relayed by local newspapers and radio stations. By midweek, it had reached not only believers in Ukraine, but many in the diaspora around the world. Here was an unexpected sign, a vision of hope, a spur for the faithful to gather together in prayer. So here are all these pilgrims coming in great numbers. But there was a problem. They were pouring into the village, but their hopes of gaining access to the church were frustrated as the doors were bolted by 2 huge stable locks. The keys were held by a party member who had conveniently left for another town. So, they were all over the place and they couldn't get in. The crowd on that first Sunday was so big that the priest had to celebrate the liturgy 5 times, 20,000 present on each occasion. Afterwards, the people gathered and prayed the rosary until dusk. Now, the rosary is coming into this, even in that part of the world, and you'll soon find out why. As the sun departed, a light of beautiful colours, blue, red, yellow, orange, gently covered the whole area. A warm and gentle breeze made the trees rustle and the grass move. Suddenly, she appeared, resplendent and beautiful, acknowledging the people and bowing her head in greeting. Nearly everyone was claiming to see her. Those who'd come to ridicule were not so privileged. The Virgin of Urushiv was seen simultaneously by different groups in different ways. People cried out and pleaded for her blessing and for her intercession. Some, prostrate on the ground, prayed in thanksgiving. When it seemed that she was about to speak, the crowd hushed. Slowly, the Holy Virgin of Urushiv raised her blue and amber rosary beads and kissed them with great reverence. She addressed the crowd. I come to you with tears in my eyes, and I implore you to pray and work for good and for the glory of God. Ukraine was the first country to acknowledge me as Queen, and I have received her under my care. Work for God, for without this there is no happiness, and no one will gain the kingdom of God. Now, after the liquidation of the Catholic Church between 1945 and 1946, the chapel was registered as Orthodox. That was forcefully making all these Orthodox, but was removed from the rolls and was finally taken off the register in 1958, when it was abandoned. In 1987, this very year, it was rumoured that the local authorities were intending to convert the chapel into a museum of atheism. There's a historical note here as to how the authorities reacted. You can just imagine. The police and the KGB decided the best way of killing off the apparition was one of containment, but they had not allowed for divine intervention. For the whole of the month of May, witnesses were claiming daily visions. On May the 14th, in a light extending from the earth to the sky, she appeared many times, all day long. So it continued until the Feast of the Assumption in August. There is here an aside. Some claim that prophecy made years earlier was being fulfilled. Many Ukrainian Catholics believe that before the end of our times and the promised freedom of Ukraine, the Blessed Virgin Mary would appear in 14 shrines, culminating in a final appearance in Kiev. That's where Russia was baptized, 1,000 years ago. Above the most ancient of all icons, the Oranta, that means the plain one, of Santa Sofia. The messages of mid-May were an echo of this. My faithful, how joyful I am to be with you at your shrines. I see your faith and strength, and how you have persevered in fidelity to the Church. There she means the Catholic Church under duress, even when all hope seemed to have gone. This is why I ask you to forgive your enemies. Through you and the blood of martyrs will come, wait for it, the conversion of Russia. Repent and love one another. The times are coming which have been foretold as being those in the end times. See the desolation which surrounds the world, the sins the sloth, the genocide. Pray for Russia. Oppression and wars continue to occupy the minds and hearts of so many people. Russia, despite everything, continues to deny my son. She rejects real life and continues to live in darkness. My daughter Ukraine, just addressing the whole country there, my daughter Ukraine, I am interceding and praying for you and your future. You are dear and precious to me. If there is not a return of Christianity to Russia, there will be a third world war, and the whole world faces ruin. Wars are glorified. They have changed in technique considerably since the Great War 100 years ago this year to an eventual war that might happen again. Here it is based on the soldier. Now it is based on the button and all that that can do at a distance. Frightening. So, in that optic, I just finished with one story reminding you all that in the last resort, going back to the gospel itself, what matters is that on an individual basis, that the soul, wherever it finds itself in its context, is orientated. Nothing at all can take the place of that. At the last moment, the will is orientated. One story, and then we'll celebrate Mass for the Holy Souls, which doesn't do any harm. In the hall of a great railway terminus in Paris, a number of wounded were laid out on the straw, waiting to be taken to a hospital. 8 of them were very badly hurt, and some of them were evidently not long for this world. One of them seemed to be very uneasy. A nurse went up to him and offered to rearrange his bandages. His reply was, "I want a confessor badly." "Is there a priest here?" asked the nurse. Just then, another soldier, remember there were about over 2,000 mobilized soldiers in the French army, had to go, they weren't exempt, in the trenches. Just then, another soldier, lying mortally wounded, plucked the nurse by the sleeve. That's all he could do. "Madam," he said, "I am a priest. I can give him absolution. Carry me to him." The nurse hesitated. The soldier was suffering from the effects of a horrible shell wound, and the least movement gave him excruciating pain. But again, the feeble voice quietly said, "You are of the faith, and you know the price of a soul. What is one more hour of life compared with that?" And the soldier raised himself by a supreme effort to go to the side of his comrade. But the effort was in vain. He had to be carried. The confession did not take long, and the strength of the soldier priest was ebbing rapidly away. When the time came to give the absolution, he made a sign to the nurse. "Help me to give the sign." The nurse held up his arm while this was being done. Death followed quickly, but the soldier priest and his penitent, they died hand in hand.